The dust on Route 9 never really settled. It just moved from one place to another, carried by the dry wind that swept across the flatlands of West Texas like it had somewhere important to be. Earl Dawson had watched that dust his whole life, watched it rise from the Kalish Road when a truck passed, watched it coat the hood of his old Ford F-150 in a fine pale film every single morning, watched it drift through the gaps in the barn door and settle on things that hadn't been touched in years. He was 67 years old and he moved like a man who had made peace with pain a long time ago. His knees ached when the weather changed, and in Abilene the weather changed often, swinging between brutal heat and sharp cold with no apology. His lower back had been giving him trouble since 1987, when he fell off the cab of a John Deere trying to fix a busted hydraulic line. His hands, wide, thick-knuckled, permanently stained with grease and soil, told the full story of a life spent working land that didn't always cooperate. Earl Dawson was not a man anyone would look at twice in a grocery store. He wore the same kind of clothes every day, a plain cotton shirt, usually plaid, tucked into straight-leg jeans that had been washed so many times they'd faded to the color of a winter sky, brown work boots, scuffed at the toes, a belt with a plain silver buckle, nothing fancy, nothing engraved, just a buckle that held his pants up, and the hat, always the hat, a weathered straw, resistal that had been reshaped by sweat and rain into something that couldn't be bought in any store anymore. It was just his hat now. It fit the exact shape of his head, the exact slouch of his posture. He lived alone on 42 acres outside of Abilene, in a house that his father had built in 1959, and that Earl had expanded twice, once when he married Dottie, and once when the kids came. The house was modest by any standard, 3 bedrooms, a kitchen that opened into a living room, a covered porch that wrapped around the front and the south side, where Earl spent most of his evenings in a wooden rocking chair, watching the sun go down over the mesquite. Dottie had been gone for 11 years. The kids, well, that was a different kind of gone. Earl was fixing the gate on the south pasture when he heard the truck coming down the road. He didn't need to look up to know it was his son Bobby's truck, a 2019 Ram 1500 with a cracked taillight that Bobby kept saying he'd fix and never did. It rattled on the cattle guard at the entrance in a specific way that Earl had memorized without trying. He kept working. The hinge on the gate post had rusted through and he was threading a new bolt when Bobby pulled up and cut the engine. "Morning, Dad." "Morning." Earl didn't look up. Bobby Dawson was 41 years old, built like his father, but with softer edges. He'd spent the last 15 years in an office managing agricultural supply accounts for a regional co-op, and the physical hardness that Earl carried had never fully formed in him. He had his mother's eyes, light brown and quick, always scanning for something. He stood by the truck for a moment, watching his father work, hands in his jacket pockets. "Tyler's coming this weekend," Bobby said. "I know," he called. "He's bringing some friends," Earl grunted, turned the bolt another quarter turn. "He's excited about something." Bobby paused. "I'm not sure what. He'll tell me when he gets here." Bobby scuffed his boot in the dirt. There was something else he wanted to say. Earl could always tell. Bobby had never been good at coming to the point. He circled things the way a dog circled a spot before lying down. "Dad, can I ask you something? You're going to anyway." Bobby almost smiled. "When's the last time you went into town?" "Actually went in, not just to the feed store." Earl set down his wrench and looked at his son for the first time. "What kind of question is that?" "A regular one." "I went to the Brookshire Brothers 2 weeks ago. I mean somewhere social. The diner, church, anything." Earl picked the wrench back up. "I'm not a social animal, Bobby, never was. You know that. Mom used to get you out." The words landed in the air between them and stayed there. Bobby had the decency to look like he wished he hadn't said it. Earl didn't react, not visibly. He finished threading the bolt, tested the gate swing, decided it was good enough, and stood up slowly, pressing one hand to his lower back. "Gate's fixed," he said. He picked up his toolbox. "You want coffee?" "Sure." Bobby said quietly. They walked to the house without speaking, the way men do when they've said too much and not enough at the same time. The guitar had been in the corner of Earl's bedroom for 23 years. It was a 1974 Martin D28, a dreadnought with a spruce top and rosewood back and sides. The kind of guitar that aged into its own beauty, the wood darkening and deepening with time like good leather. Earl had bought it used in 1981 from a man named Pete Holloway, who was moving to Arizona and needed cash fast. He'd paid $400 for it, which was more money than he should have spent at the Tim, and Dottie had given him a look that could have cured leather when he brought it home. But she'd forgiven him within a week because she loved to hear him play. He'd play that guitar nearly every day for 2 decades. He played it in the evenings on the porch. He played it at church when the regular guitarist had his appendix out and they needed someone to fill in. He played it at family gatherings, at the 4th of July barbecues at the Kellner Ranch next door, at birthday parties and anniversaries, and once, memorably, at the Abilene Frontier Days Festival in 1994, where he'd stood on a flatbed trailer with a borrowed PA system and played 6 songs to a crowd of maybe 300 people who'd stopped in their tracks and stayed. He had a voice, not a perfect voice, not a trained voice, but a voice that did something to the air when it came out. Low and weathered and true, the kind of voice that came from a particular combination of genetics and geography and a lifetime of feeling things without always knowing how to say them. People had told him his whole life that his voice did something to them. He'd never known quite how to take that. Then Dottie died. It wasn't sudden. She'd been sick for 2 years, breast cancer that spread slow and then fast the way it sometimes does. Earl had been present for every doctor's appointment, every treatment, every bad night, and every rare good morning. He had been the person who held her hand in the hospital at 3 a.m. when the pain was bad. He had been the person who read to her in the last weeks, when she couldn't read herself anymore. Westerns mostly, because that's what she liked. Louis L'Amour, Zane Grey. When she died, in April, on a morning when the bluebonnets were just coming up along the highway, Earl had gone home, walked into the bedroom, set the Martin D28 in the corner, and never played it again. People asked him about it over the years. Bobby had asked. His daughter, his other child, the one he didn't talk about icily, had asked, once before things between them got complicated. His friend, Dale Kowalski, who'd known Earl since they were in high school together, asked him about it one time at the diner, and Earl had changed the subject so deliberately that Dale never brought it up again. The guitar sat in the corner. Earl dusted it occasionally. He never touched the strings. Tyler Dawson was 16 and had his grandfather's ears. Not literally, though they were in fact shaped similarly, a point of gentle family mockery. What he had was the same sensitivity to sound, the same way of hearing music, not just as rhythm and melody, but as something that carried weight and meaning. He'd picked it up early, the way some kids pick up languages, naturally, hungrily, without effort. He played guitar himself, electric mostly, and had aspirations toward a genre that Bobby referred to diplomatically as that loud stuff. But Tyler had grown up hearing his father talk about Earl's voice with the reverence that most 16-year-olds would have found embarrassing in their parents. Bobby Dawson didn't talk about much with awe, but when he talked about Earl's singing, his voice changed. Tyler had arrived on Friday afternoon with 2 duffel bags and his friend Connor Webb, a lanky kid from his school in Abilene who was obsessed with audio engineering and carried a portable recording setup in a backpack like most kids carried books. Tyler had asked if it was okay to bring him, and Earl had said yes, without asking why, because he generally trusted Tyler to have a reason for things. They'd had dinner. Earl made chicken fried steak, the one thing he cooked with genuine pride, and afterward they sat on the porch while the sky went orange and then purple and the first stars came out over the flatlands. Tyler was quiet for a while. Earl noticed him working up to something, the same way Bobby worked up to things, and felt a familiar patience settle in. "Grandpa," Tyler said eventually, "I did something. Did something." "Yeah." Tyler looked at the floor of the porch. "I signed you up for something, and I probably should have asked first, but I didn't." Earl looked at him. "What did you sign me up for?" "The Frontier Heritage Festival in Abilene." "It's 3 weeks from now." Tyler looked up. "The open stage. The one they do in the Kellner barn." Earl was quiet for a moment. "The singing competition," he said. "It's not really a competition, it's more like a showcase. It's for," Tyler was talking faster now, filling the silence. "It's for local talent. Anyone can sign up, there's no prize or anything. It's just people perform, and people listen." "Tyler, I know, Grandpa, I know you haven't played in a long time. But Connor and I were looking up stuff about you, and we found this video from 1994. Someone recorded you at Frontier Days on an old camcorder, and it's on YouTube. It's got like 40 views, but Grandpa, we watched it," and he stopped. "Your voice? I had no idea." Earl sat with that for a moment. 40 views on a video from 1994. Someone had put that out into the world and he'd never known. "I don't sing anymore," Earl said. "I know. Then why did you sign me up?" Tyler was quiet. When he spoke again, his voice was different, younger, more exposed. "Because I've never heard you sing. Not once in my whole life. And I think that's wrong, Grandpa. I think something happened that shouldn't have." Earl looked out at the dark. The mesquite trees were silhouettes against the last light in the west. Somewhere out in the pasture, one of the neighbor's cows made a low, mournful sound. "You shouldn't have done that," Earl said. "I know," Tyler said. "I'm sorry. But I already paid the $15 entry fee." Despite everything, something in Earl almost smiled at that. $15, he said. "I mowed 3 lawns." Earl stood up from his rocker. "I'm going to bed," he said. "We'll talk about this tomorrow." He went inside. Tyler and Connor exchanged a look in the dark. "Did that go okay?" Connor whispered. "I have no idea," Tyler whispered back. The talk the next day was not, strictly speaking, a talk. It was an argument. Quiet, in the way that arguments between Earl and his kin tended to be quiet, without raised voices, but carrying enough weight in the pauses to fill a room. Bobby had driven out Saturday morning, and when Tyler explained what he'd done, Bobby had given his son the kind of look that said, "I know where this comes from, and I'm not sure how I feel about it." Then he'd looked at his father and seen something in Earl's expression that made him careful. "You don't have to do it, Dad," Bobby said. They were at the kitchen table. Earl had his coffee. The boys were outside. Tyler shouldn't have done it without asking. No, he shouldn't have. But Bobby hesitated. "Would you think about it?" "I'm thinking about it right now. The answer is no." "Why?" Earl set his mug down. "Because I haven't played in 23 years, Bobby. Because I'm 67 years old. Because the people at that thing are going to be half my age, and none of them know me, and I'm not interested in standing on a stage in a barn, and..." He stopped himself. "It's not something I do anymore. You were good, Dad. You were really good." That was a different person. Bobby looked at his coffee. "It was you. Same body. Different person." There was a long silence. Through the kitchen window, they could see Tyler and Connor by the fence, Connor pointing something out on his phone screen, Tyler nodding. "That boy drove 3 lawns worth of lawn mowing money to get you to do something he's never gotten to see," Bobby said quietly. "That's what this is about for him." Earl didn't say anything. "I'm not trying to pressure you," Bobby continued. "I just want you to know what's behind it." Earl picked up his mug, turned it in his hands, set it back down. Outside, Tyler laughed at something Connor said. A clear, uncomplicated sound. "He's a good kid," Earl said. "He's a lot like you," Bobby said. "More than he knows." Earl didn't respond to that. But he sat at the table for a long time after Bobby got up to refill his coffee, staring at the middle distance. His thick hands wrapped around a ceramic mug that said "World's Okayest Grandpa," a gag gift Tyler had given him 2 Christmases ago with complete sincerity. The festival was 3 weeks away. Earl had said no. But he hadn't yet thrown away the confirmation email that Tyler had printed out and left on the kitchen counter. folded in half with a note written in the margins in teenage handwriting. "No pressure, Grandpa, but I'll be there either way." The paper sat on the counter for 2 weeks. Earl moved it once from the left side to the right side, but he didn't throw it away. The Kellner barn was not a barn in any working sense anymore. Jim Kellner had converted it over 15 years, slowly and without particular urgency, into something that functioned as a community hall, a concert venue, and a storage facility for the specific kind of accumulated small-town memory that couldn't be thrown away but had no other place to go. The walls still showed the original rough timber, silver gray with age, and the smell was still fundamentally barn, hay and old wood, and something mineral underneath. But there were lights strung from the rafters, rows of mismatched chairs and benches arranged facing a low plywood stage, and a sound system that Bobby Kellner, Jim's son, had put together over the years from salvaged components and 2 pieces of actual professional equipment. The Frontier Heritage Festival drew maybe 400 people on a good year. It was a Saturday affair, a craft fair in the morning, food trucks and a brisket competition in the afternoon, and then the open stage in the barn starting at 6 in the evening. The open stage was the part people actually drove for. West Texas had more musicians per capita than most people assumed, and the Kellner barn had a reputation as a place where you could hear something real. Earl arrived at 5:30 in his truck. He sat in the parking field, a flat, dusty acre beside the barn, for 11 minutes before he got out. He'd told himself for 3 weeks that he wasn't going. He'd said it out loud to Bobby twice and to Tyler once, and each time he'd said it, he'd believed it. Then at 4:30 that Saturday, he'd found himself in the bathroom, looking in the mirror, holding his straw resistal, and he'd understood that he was going to go. And that understanding had felt less like a decision and more like something that had already been made somewhere, below the level of conscious choice. He wore the same clothes he always wore. He'd thought briefly about wearing something nicer, then dismissed the idea. He was who he was. Tyler met him outside the barn door, and the look on the boy's face, surprised, relieved, trying to contain itself, was something Earl filed away in the part of his memory where he kept the things that mattered. "You came," Tyler said. "Don't make a thing of it," Earl said. "I'm not making a thing of it. You're making a face." "That's just my face, Grandpa." Earl looked at the barn door. Music was coming from inside, a young woman with a fiddle playing something fast and clean. People were clapping along. How many people in there? Maybe 300 right now. Gets bigger later. Tyler paused. "You're third in the lineup, so about 45 minutes. What am I playing on?" "They have a house guitar. A Taylor 214. It's decent." Tyler hesitated. "I also brought the Martin." Earl looked at him. "It's in the truck," Tyler said quickly. "I just brought it. You don't have to use it. I thought maybe—" He stopped. It just seemed like maybe it should be there. Earl was quiet for a moment. Then, "How'd you get it?" "I keep the bedroom door shut." "The door doesn't actually latch, Grandpa. It hasn't latched in like 10 years. Earl made a sound that might have been a laugh. "I'll use the Taylor," he said. "The Martin stays in the truck." Inside, the barn was warm with bodies and light. The string lights gave everything a golden cast that was kinder than it had any right to be. It made people's faces softer, made the rough timber walls look like something from a painting. Earl found a seat near the back and watched the performers. The young woman with the fiddle was followed by a teenage boy who played bluegrass banjo with a technical precision that Earl respected. Then a husband and wife duo in their 50s who did Americana covers with pleasant harmonies and a slightly too polished quality that suggested they'd been doing wedding receptions for a long time. The crowd was generous. West Texas audiences knew how to listen. They also knew how to feel comfortable in their own knowledge. They'd grown up with this music, had opinions about it, had heard the real thing often enough to have calibrated standards. They applauded the teenagers warmly, and the husband-wife duo politely, and they went back to their conversations in between. Earl sat alone. Bobby was somewhere in the crowd with his wife Karen, a warm, practical woman who'd texted Earl 3 times that week just to check in, which he'd found simultaneously touching and slightly exhausting. Connor was at the soundboard because apparently Bobby Kellner had been impressed enough with the kids' setup to let him help run the house mix. Tyler materialized beside Earl about 10 minutes before his slot. "You good?" Tyler asked. "Fine. You want water?" "They have water up near the stage." "I'm fine, Tyler." Tyler sat down. He was nervous, more nervous than Earl, which Earl found oddly calming. "Grandpa, can I ask you something? When you used to play before, what did it feel like?" Earl considered the question seriously. "Like talking," he said finally, but without the fumbling around. Tyler looked at him. "That's exactly what I thought you'd say." The MC, a cheerful man in his 40s named Dennis Pratt, who sold insurance during the week, stepped up to the microphone. "All right, folks, our next performer is a gentleman who some of you may know from around these parts. Been living out on Route 9 for longer than some of us have been alive. He's a farmer, a father, a grandfather, and apparently a singer, though I'm told he keeps that last part pretty quiet. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Earl Dawson." The applause was friendly and moderate, the applause a crowd gives to someone they don't know but are willing to meet. Earl stood up. He walked to the stage the way he walked everywhere. Steady, unhurried, a slight forward lean to his posture. He stepped up onto the plywood. The Taylor 214 was on a stand to the left of the microphone. Earl picked it up, settled the strap over his shoulder. He adjusted the microphone stand down about 2 inches. He was not a tall man, but he had the posture of someone who'd spent decades doing physical work, and the height adjustment was precise and without hesitation. He looked out at the crowd. 300 faces, roughly. People of all ages, families with kids, older couples, groups of friends. Most of them were still engaged in their own conversations. A few looked up with polite attention. A table near the back had a group of men in their 30s who hadn't really looked up from their beers at all. One of those men said something to his friend, and they both laughed. Earl couldn't hear what it was from the stage. He had a reasonable guess. He didn't react. He just looked out at the room the way a man looks at a field he's about to work, taking inventory, noting conditions, making a plan. Then he put his left hand on the neck of the Taylor 214, settled his right hand over the body, and he played the first card. The card was a G, clean, full, resonant. The Taylor was a good guitar, bright in the upper register, solid in the low end. Earl let it ring for a moment longer than most people would, the way a man might pause at a door he hasn't opened in a long time. Then he started playing. He was playing Bob Wills. Specifically, he was playing San Antonio Rose, which was, in one sense, the oldest trick in the book for a Texas singer. But Earl wasn't playing it the way people played it when they were playing it safe. He was playing it the way a man plays a song he learned in his 20s and has carried inside him for 40 years. And when he opened his mouth and the first notes came out, something happened in the barn. It was not dramatic. It was actually very quiet, quieter than a dramatic thing. It was the kind of quiet that comes when a room full of people, without coordinating with each other, all decide at the same moment to pay attention. The conversation stopped. The men at the back table with their beers stopped mid-sentence. Earl's voice was low and rough and absolutely unmistakably true. It had age in it. You could hear 67 years in it, but age in the way that good bourbon has age, has depth, has complexity, as something that couldn't have existed any other way. He sang San Antonio Rose straight, no affectation, no performance tricks. Just the words and the melody and the particular quality of his voice filling that barn, the way warm air fills a cold room, slowly, completely, until you couldn't remember what it had felt like before. Bobby Dawson, standing near the left wall with his arm around Karen, felt his throat tighten in a way he hadn't expected. Karen looked up at him and he shook his head slightly. "Don't say anything," and she understood. Tyler, standing near the soundboard, had gone completely still. Connor, beside him, was staring at the stage with his mouth slightly open. Then Connor, who was 17 and generally not given to impulse, reached into his backpack, got out his portable recorder, and turned it on. Dennis Pratt, the MC, stood at the side of the stage with his clipboard and watched with an expression that he would later describe to his wife as like hearing something you didn't know you'd been waiting to hear. Earl finished San Antonio Rose and went directly, without pausing, into Panhandle Rag. Instrumental, his right hand moving across the strings with a fluency that belied 23 years of silence. Because music that deep doesn't leave, it just waits. And then he came back to vocals with a song that nobody in the barn expected, an original. He'd written it a long time ago. He'd never played it for anyone but Dottie. It had no title. He'd just always thought of it as her song. It was about the dust on Route 9, about watching a woman hang laundry on a line in April while bluebonnets came up along the fence, about the specific quality of light in West Texas at 5 in the evening in October when everything turned gold and the person you loved was right there in it. And you understood in your body, not your mind, your body, that this was the whole of everything that mattered. By the time he finished, the barn was so quiet that you could hear the wind against the outside walls. Then somebody started clapping, and within 3 seconds the whole place was on its feet. Earl stood there with the Taylor 214 and looked out at 300 people, applauding, and felt something move through him that he couldn't name. Something between grief and gratitude and the very specific vertigo of rediscovering something you'd put away so long ago that you'd half convinced yourself it was gone. He nodded once, set the guitar carefully back on its stand, and walked off the stage. He found a spot outside the barn, around the side, in the dark beyond the string lights. He needed a moment. The applause was still going inside. He could hear it through the barn wall. He stood in the cool October dark and breathed. Tyler found him there 2 minutes later. The boy didn't say anything at first. He just stood beside his grandfather in the dark. Earl appreciated that. Connor recorded it, Tyler said eventually. I figured he would. Is that okay? Earl thought about it. I suppose so. Another silence. Grandpa, Tyler said. That song, the last one. What was it called? Doesn't have a name. What was it about? Earl looked up at the sky. The Milky Way was out. You could see it properly out here, away from town. A white smear across the black like something half erased. It was about your grandmother, he said. Tyler was quiet for a moment, then carefully. I was 6 when she died. I barely remember her. I know, but I feel like I just... Tyler stopped, started again. I feel like I just met her. Earl put his hand on his grandson's shoulder, a brief, firm grip. Then he let go. Let's go find your father, he said. They walked back around to the front of the barn where Bobby and Karen were waiting. And Bobby looked at his father and didn't say a word, just reached out and gripped his arm for a second, and Earl let him. That night, Connor Webb uploaded the recording to YouTube. He used his phone to film the audio playing from his recorder over a still image of the darkened stage. He wrote the title, Old Man from Abilene TX absolutely owns it at local festival. He thought about the title, decided it was fine, and posted it. He went to sleep with 17 views. He woke up with 4,000. The internet's capacity for sudden attention is a strange thing, less like a wave than like a flash flood in a dry creek bed. Nothing, 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 and then everything at once. And the thing that was standing in that creek bed finds itself carried somewhere it had no intention of going. Connor's video went from 4,000 views on Sunday morning to 22,000 by Sunday evening. By Monday, it had crossed 50,000. By Wednesday, it had been shared by 3 separate country music accounts on Instagram. Picked up by a music blog out of Nashville called Roots and Rails that wrote 300 words about Earl under the headline. This Texas grandfather just reminded everyone what country music is supposed to sound like, and clipped by a TikTok account called At Real Country Not Pop that had 1.4 million followers, and captioned it simply, "This man's voice will rearrange your organs." By the following Friday, 9 days after the Kellner barn, the video had been viewed 1.2 million times. Earl did not know any of this. He didn't have a smartphone. He had a flip phone that he used to call Bobby and Tyler and his neighbor Dale Kowalski and nobody else. He had a desktop computer in the living room that he used for checking the weather and occasionally reading the Abilene Reporter news. But he did not have social media accounts of any kind and had never felt the absence. The first indication he had that something had happened came from Dale, who showed up on Tuesday morning with his phone out and an expression Earl had never seen on his friend's face in 50 years of friendship. Dale Kowalski was 69 years old, a retired diesel mechanic with a gray beard and the permanent tan of a man who'd spent his life outdoors. He was not easily impressed by things, and he was not given to making scenes. When he pulled up to Earl's house and came to the porch with his phone held out like it was something both precious and slightly dangerous, Earl paid attention. "What is that?" Earl said. "That's you," Dale said, "on the internet. 1 million people have watched you sing." Earl looked at the screen. The video was small and the audio wasn't great, but it was unmistakably him. The straw hat, the posture, the way his right hand moved across the strings. He watched himself play the first few bars of San Antonio Rose. He handed the phone back to Dale. He said. Dale said. "Earl, 1 million people watched you sing. I heard you. On the internet. I understood the first time. You don't." Dale sat down heavily in the second porch chair. "You really don't care, do you?" Earl considered. "I care that Connor's recording worked out for him. He worked hard on that setup." Dale stared at him for a moment, then laughed, a full, genuine, slightly helpless laugh. "You are the most aggravating man I have ever known in my life," he said. Tyler, meanwhile, was reading the comments section of the video with the focused intensity of someone trying to understand something they couldn't quite believe. It was, in his experience as a person who spent significant time on the internet, an unusual comment section. Comment sections were generally not kind places. But something about Earl's video had produced a different kind of response, not the usual cascade of arguments and posturing, but something more like collective recognition. People were talking to each other, sharing things. "My grandfather used to sound like this before he died. Thank you for this. I've been listening to country music my whole life, and I don't know when it started sounding like everything else, but this is what it was supposed to be. Does anyone know who this man is? Someone needs to give him a record deal immediately. I played this for my mom who has dementia, and she went completely still, and then she started crying, and said that's like the music from when I was young. I've never seen her react to anything like that in 2 years. The last song he plays, is that an original? Because if so, that's the best song I've heard in 10 years. No joke. The way he just walks up there with those worn boots and that hat and just doesn't perform, just is man." Tyler scrolled for a while, then put his phone down. He called his grandfather. "Grandpa, have you seen the comments?" "I haven't looked. You should look, Tyler. There's a woman who says you made her mom, who has dementia, respond to music for the first time in 2 years." A long pause. "That's something," Earl said. "There's a whole conversation about your original song. People are asking about it everywhere. They want to know if it has a name, if it's recorded, if you have an album." "I don't have an album." "I know that, Grandpa." Tyler paused. Does this bother you, the attention? It's on a screen somewhere. It doesn't really reach me out here." "It might," Tyler said. "Eventually." "Well," Earl said, "we'll see about that." 300 miles south of Abilene in San Antonio, a man named Rick Holloway was watching the video on a laptop in an office on the second floor of a building on Broadway, near the Pearl District. Rick was 44 years old, with a quick mind and the slightly frazzled energy of someone who managed complex logistics for a living. He was the operations director for the George Strait Charity Foundation, the organization that ran, among other things, the annual Boots and Hearts benefit concert in San Antonio, which raised money for Texas children's hospitals and had, over its 12-year history, become one of the more significant events on the Texas entertainment calendar. Rick had been sent the video by 3 different people within a single 12-hour period. His assistant had flagged it. His college friend in Austin had texted him, "Have you seen this old man from Abilene?" And his wife had shown it to him over breakfast with no context, just watch this. He'd watched it 3 times. Now he was watching it a 4th time, and he was doing the math. The Boots and Hearts concert was 8 weeks away. The lineup was set, headlined, as always, by George Strait himself, with several supporting acts and an opening slot that traditionally went to an emerging or local Texas talent. The opening slot was this year, already filled. A young singer-songwriter from Lubbock named Jesse Dalton who was generating some buzz. That was fine. But there was also a tradition at Boots and Hearts in the last 3 years. They'd incorporated a special guest moment into the program, someone unexpected, someone with a story, someone who represented the deeper roots of what the music was about. The previous year it had been an 80-year-old Tejano guitarist from San Antonio's west side who'd played with Freddie Fender in 1975, the year before that. A retired school teacher from Amarillo who'd written songs her whole life and never recorded any of them. Rick watched Earl Dawson walk up to that stage in the Kellner barn and play San Antonio Rose, and something clicked in his operational mind with the authority of a good decision recognizing itself. He picked up his phone and made a call. Earl was on the porch with his coffee at 7:40 in the morning when the phone rang. His flip phone, an unknown number, area code 210, which he didn't immediately recognize. He almost didn't answer it. He generally didn't answer unknown numbers, but something made him flip it open. "Hello, good morning. Is this Earl Dawson? The Earl Dawson from Abilene?" "Depends on who's asking." A short, warm laugh. "My name is Rick Holloway. I'm calling from San Antonio. I work for the George Strait Charity Foundation. I'm wondering if you've got a few minutes to talk." Earl set his coffee mug down very deliberately on the porch railing. "George Strait's Foundation," he said. "Yes, sir. I've been watching a video of you performing at a festival in Abilene a couple of weeks ago. I imagine you're aware the video has—" "I'm aware," Earl said. "Right. Well, Mr. Dawson, I'll get straight to the point because I get the sense you're a straight-to-the-point kind of man. We have an annual benefit concert here in San Antonio, the Boots and Hearts concert for the Children's Hospital. George Strait headlines it every year. This year it's 7 weeks from Saturday, and I wanted to talk to you about the possibility of you performing." Earl was quiet for a moment. A hawk was circling over the south pasture, high and slow against the blue. "I'm 67 years old," Earl said. "I'm a retired farmer from Abilene who sang at a local barn show." "Yes, sir. That's exactly who we'd like to have. There are professional musicians who would do that job better. With respect, Mr. Dawson, we have professional musicians. That's not what this slot is about." Rick paused. "We have a portion of the program dedicated to celebrating the roots of Texas music. Real roots, not the polished version." Another pause. "I've watched that video 4 times. I've made my wife watch it twice. I've had George's manager call me to ask about it. What you do in that barn, that's what this is about." Earl looked out at the pasture. The hawk had caught a thermal and was rising, barely moving its wings. Effortless. "You said George Strait's manager called you?" "Yes, sir." "George Strait's seen the video?" "He has." Earl absorbed that for a moment. "George Strait doesn't need me on his stage," he said. "With the greatest respect, Mr. Dawson, that's not for either of us to decide. What I'm asking is whether you'd be willing to have a conversation about it." Silence. "When would you need an answer?" Earl said. "No rush. Within the next week or 2, if possible." "I'll think about it," Earl said. "That's all I can ask." "Thank you for your time, Mr. Dawson." Earl closed the flip phone. He sat on the porch for a long time without moving. His coffee went cold. The hawk disappeared over the North Ridge. He did not call Bobby that day. He did not call Tyler. He sat with the information the way he sat with everything, alone, quietly turning it over in his hands. That evening he went to the bedroom. He stood for a moment looking at the corner. Then he reached down, picked up the Martin D28, and sat on the edge of the bed with it in his lap. He didn't play. He just held it, felt the weight of it. the slight warmth of old wood. Outside, the Texas dark came on, big and full of stars. Earl told Bobby 4 days later. He drove to Abilene, to the small house in a quiet neighborhood near the university where Bobby and Karen lived. And he sat at their kitchen table, the same table where Earl had sat at holiday dinners for 15 years, and told Bobby about the phone call. Bobby was quiet through the whole thing. Karen, who had come in from the backyard and was standing in the kitchen doorway drying her hands on a dish towel, was quiet too. When Earl finished, Bobby said, "What do you want to do?" "I don't know yet," Earl said. "What's stopping you?" Earl looked at the table. "It's different from a barn in Abilene." "In what way?" "In every way." Bobby turned his coffee mug in circles on the table. "Is it the stage? The people?" "Partly." "What else?" Earl looked up. "Jolene." Bobby stopped turning the mug. Jolene Dawson was 44 years old. She was Earl's daughter, his and Dottie's second child, born 5 years after Bobby. She lived in Austin now, worked as an accountant with a firm downtown. She had a husband, a man named Patrick Greer, and 2 kids, a boy and a girl, both in middle school. Earl knew these facts the way you know things about people you love from a distance, as a collection of information that doesn't fully add up to presence. They had not spoken in 3 years. Not since the argument at Dottie's memorial, the second memorial, the one the family had held at the church on the 5th anniversary of her death. A gathering that had started in grief and ended in a collision that had been building for years and finally hit. Earl had said things, Jolene had said things. Bobby had tried to stand between them and gotten bruised by both sides. And then Jolene had driven back to Austin and the silence had settled in, the way that certain silences do, not empty, but full of everything that had been said and everything that hadn't. "If I do this, if this becomes something people pay attention to," Earl said, "she'll hear about it. She may already have seen the video. I don't want her to find out I'm performing at some concert in San Antonio from the internet. So call her. It's not that simple." "It never is," Bobby said. "Call her anyway." Earl was quiet. "Dad." Bobby leaned forward. "Whatever happened between you and Joe, and I know what happened. I was there. It's been 3 years. The kids don't know their grandfather. Patrick asks about you. I know that because Joe tells me things." He stopped. "She watches your video, Earl. I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure how you'd take it. But she's watched it. Multiple times." Earl looked at his son. "How do you know that?" "She called me last week. When it was going around, she called me and she didn't say much, but she said it sounded like Dad." The kitchen was very quiet. "Just like Dad," Bobby repeated. Earl stood up. He went to the window and looked out at Bobby's backyard, the trampoline his grandkids used when they visited, the vegetable garden Karen kept, the big pecan tree that lost its leaves late every year. An ordinary backyard in a West Texas town. The whole world reduced to a comfortable size. "I don't know how to start that conversation," he said. "With your voice," Bobby said. "You always were better at saying things in song than in words." The preparation for the Boots and Hearts performance was not what Earl had expected, and the expectation gap itself told him something about how far he'd drifted from the world. Rick Holloway had been professional and thorough. He'd arranged for Earl to come to San Antonio for a technical rehearsal 2 weeks before the show, a visit to the venue, the AT&T Center, which was not a barn in Abilene. It was a 20,000-seat arena. Earl had stood on the stage during the rehearsal and looked out at the empty seats and understood something with his body that he hadn't understood abstractly. This was a different scale of thing. "You all right?" Rick had asked, standing behind him. "Figuring it out," Earl said. "Take your time. How many people does this hold? Tonight? About 18,000. It sells out every year." Earl looked at the seats, row after row, rising up into the shadows above the lights. 18,000 people. Yes, sir. To hear George Strait. To hear George Strait. And this year, a few minutes of you first. Earl had played his 3 songs in the empty arena: San Antonio Rose, Panhandle Rag, and the original with no name, and the sound had surprised him. The acoustics of a big arena, properly tuned, are a different instrument in themselves. His voice came back to him from strange directions, fuller and more resonant than in any barn. He had stood in the middle of that enormous stage with his Martin D28, he'd decided, to bring the Martin, and played to nobody. And by the end of the 3rd song, he'd understood something about why he'd put the guitar in the corner, and also why he needed to take it out again. On the drive back to Abilene, alone in the F-150 with the flat landscape opening up around him, he called Jolene Part 3. The call to Austin, the phone rang 4 times. He thought she wasn't going to answer. Dad, her voice hadn't changed. That was the first thing he noticed. 3 years of silence, and her voice was exactly as he remembered it. The particular cadence of it, the slightly formal quality she'd always had. Like she was being careful with her words from the very first sentence. Joe. A silence. "Got the video," she said. "Bobby told me it's... you sound like yourself." A pause. "You sound like you did when I was a kid." Earl drove. The highway stretched ahead, straight and flat, the way Texas highways do. "I'm calling because I'm playing a concert," he said. "In San Antonio for the George Strait Foundation. In 2 weeks." A longer pause. "I know," she said. "It's on their website. Bobby mentioned I looked it up. I wanted you to hear it from me." "Okay." Her voice was careful. He could hear her managing herself the way she always had. Jolene had never been a person who let things show easily. She took after him in that, though neither of them had ever said so. "I also want to talk," Earl said, "about the other thing." "Which part of the other thing?" "All of it, any of it, whatever you can stand." The silence this time was different, not empty, but listening. "That's a lot of ground to cover on the phone," she said. "I know, Dad." She stopped. He could hear her breathing. Are you okay, in general?" "I'm alright. I've been alright. He looked at the highway. "I've been alone out there a long time, Joe. And I'm starting to think that some of it was my choice, and I didn't fully understand I was making it." Another long silence. "Patrick's been wanting to come out to Abilene," she said. "With the kids. They don't really know the ranch. They're welcome. Anytime. Maybe." She paused again, and he heard in that pause something that cost her something to allow. "Maybe we could come to the concert, and then come to Abilene after." Earl's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "I'd like that," he said. "I'd like that a lot." "Okay." Her voice was softer now. "Okay, Dad." They talked for 20 minutes. Careful, imperfect, real. They didn't resolve 3 years' worth of distance. They didn't get to the heart of the argument at the memorial. Didn't untangle all the threads of what had been said, and what had been meant, and what had been unforgivable. And then, over time, forgiven quietly inside each of them, without either one knowing it had happened for the other too. But they talked, and when he hung up the phone, Earl Dawson was 70 miles outside of Abilene with wet eyes and the particular feeling of something that had been held closed for too long being held open, just a little, just enough for air. The night before the concert, Earl sat on the porch with Dale. They'd known each other 51 years. They'd worked side by side in the summers during high school, had gone to the same church for 4 decades, had varied spouses 1 year apart, Dale's wife Margaret from a heart attack, Dottie from the cancer. They didn't need to talk very much to be in each other's company productively. They sat with their coffee and watched the stars and didn't say anything for a long while. "You nervous?" Dale said. "Some. About the playing or about Jolene?" "Both." Dale nodded slowly. "Margaret would have loved to see this. She would have made a production out of it," Earl said. "She'd have gotten a shirt made." Dale laughed. "She absolutely would have. My best friend is performing for George Strait in Iron and Letters." He shook his head fondly. "Lord, I miss that woman." "Me too," Earl said. He meant it. Margaret had been part of the furniture of his life for so long that her absence had its own shape, its own weight, sitting in the space beside Dale, wherever Dale was. Dottie would have been there, Dale said, front row. Not because she needed to be, she could hear you from anywhere, but because she'd have wanted you to see her face. Earl looked at the dark. She always said she loved watching you more than she loved listening to you, Dale continued. Said when you played, you got out of your own way. Like something came through you that couldn't come through any other way. She said a lot of things. She was right about most of them. She was, Earl agreed. She was right about most of them. The stars turned. The Texas dark settled around the porch like something comfortable and familiar. Something that had always been there and would be there after everything else was gone. You ready? Dale said. I think so, Earl said. I think that's what I've been working out. And Earl picked up his coffee mug, drank, set it down. Yeah, he said, I'm ready. The next morning, Earl Dawson loaded the Martin D-28 in its case into the back seat of the F-150, put his straw resistor on his head, and drove south toward San Antonio. In the passenger seat, where Dottie used to sit on long drives, was Tyler's note, the one from the kitchen counter, the one that said, "No pressure, Grandpa, but I'll be there either way." He'd never thrown it away. The AT&T Center on a concert night is its own kind of weather system. Earl arrived at 4 in the afternoon for the call time Rick had given him. He came through a side entrance off the loading dock, Bobby's truck, because Bobby had insisted on driving. Tyler in the back seat, quiet, with the specific quality of quiet that meant he was feeling something he wasn't sure how to say. In the truck bed, in its case, was the Martin. The arena was already alive with the organized chaos of a major show, stagehands moving equipment, crew members with headsets walking fast, caterers, security, sound engineers calling to each other across distances. Rick met them at the door, a quick, warm handshake, the practiced efficiency of a man who'd done this many times and genuinely liked doing it. "Good to have you here, Mr. Dawson," Rick said. "Everything's ready. Your dressing room is down this corridor. Sound check is at 5:30. The show starts at 7:30. You're on at 7:40, 10 minutes after the house opens." Before the headliner, Earl said, "Yes, sir. You're the opener for the main event. About 15 to 20 minutes, 3 songs, as we discussed." Rick paused. "George will be here around 6. He'd like to meet you if you're willing." "George Strait wants to meet me," Earl said. "He does." Earl looked at his son. Bobby was doing the very specific thing he did when he was trying not to show what he was feeling. The slight over-control of his expression, the careful neutral. Tyler had no such control. Tyler was lit up like a kid on Christmas morning, trying to look cool about it, failing completely. "All right," Earl said. The dressing room was functional and modest, a mirror with lights, a chair, a couch, a table with water, and a fruit tray that Earl looked at without touching. He sat on the couch with the Martin case on the floor beside him and looked at himself in the mirror from across the room. An old man with a straw hat and worn boots in a concert venue dressing room. He thought about Dottie. He did this often, in moments that were too big for just himself. He brought her into them, as an act of imagination, as a way of sharing something she should have been present for. "You're sitting in a dressing room at the AT&T Center," he told her silently. "You wouldn't believe this place. It's enormous." He could hear her voice in response, not supernaturally, just the way you hear the voice of someone you've known for 4 decades, the way their particular cadences get absorbed into your own thinking. She'd say something dry and affectionate. She'd tell him to fix his collar. She'd tell him she'd be watching. There was a knock at the door. "Come in," Earl said. The door opened. And Earl Dawson, who had been unimpressed by most things in his life and had made a kind of philosophy of it, felt the specific feeling that comes when something real meets you, and you recognize it as real without needing to be told. George Strait was 60-something and looked exactly like himself, which is to say, he looked like a man who had spent his entire life being exactly who he was, without apology or performance. He was tall, lean, with the easy posture of someone comfortable in their own skin. He wore jeans, a plain button-down, and boots that were well-made and well-worn. He had his hat, a silver belly felt, properly creased, and he carried himself the way men from that part of Texas carried themselves, unhurried, direct, taking up exactly the amount of space he needed, and no more. Behind him was a younger man, mid-30s, probably an assistant, who closed the door quietly and stayed near it. George Strait looked at Earl. Earl looked at George Strait. "Mr. Dawson," George said, and extended his hand. Earl stood up and shook it. "Mr. Strait, George." "Earl." George looked around the room briefly, at Tyler, who had gone so still he might have been taxidermied, and at Bobby, who had the expression of a man watching something he would describe to people for the rest of his life, and then back at Earl. "You mind if I sit for a minute?" "Please," Earl said. They both sat. The younger man by the door became invisible. Tyler and Bobby seemed to understand without being told that this was a two-person conversation, and they drifted to the far end of the room with the careful consideration of people who knew their role. George leaned forward slightly, forearms on his knees, the posture of a man who actually wanted to talk. "I watched that video about 12 times, he said. "I've been told it went around some," Earl said. "Went around some." The corner of George's mouth moved. "Earl, that video has been watched 7 million times as of this morning." Earl absorbed that without showing much. "Chim." George studied him for a moment with what looked like genuine appreciation. "Rick told me you said HM when he told you about the million views too. It's a lot of views for a man playing in a barn." "It is," George agreed. "You know why? I've got some thoughts on it." "Tell me." Earl considered. "Because it doesn't sound like anything being sold," he said. "People have been sold so much for so long that when they hear something that isn't selling anything, they don't know what it is at first, but they feel it." George was quiet for a moment. "That's exactly right," he said. "That is exactly right." He sat back. "That original song, the last one, what's it called?" "It doesn't have a name." "What's it about?" Earl looked at him steadily. "My wife. She's been gone 11 years. George Strait held that for a moment with the quiet of a man who understood what that meant, not abstractly, but as a weight he'd carried himself in other forms. "I'm sorry," he said. "Thank you." "That song needs a name," George said, "and it needs to exist in the world in some permanent form. That's my opinion. You can do with it what you want." Earl looked down at the Martin case. "I've been thinking on that. There are people who would want to help you with that. Good people. No pressure, that's not why I'm here." George paused. "I'm here because I wanted to meet the man, and because I wanted to tell you something before you go out there tonight." Earl looked up. "What you're going to do tonight, playing before 18,000 people. Some men find that terrifying. Some men find it intoxicating. Some men find it both." George leaned forward again. "But I've seen the video, and I know you're none of those things. You're just a man who has something real to say and knows how to say it in this particular language. The size of the room doesn't change what you're saying." He paused. "Don't let it change how you say it." Earl held the older man's eyes. "You came to tell me that. I came to tell you that. A beat. I appreciate it," Earl said. "You got a good family," George said, glancing toward Tyler and Bobby. "That boy over there, your grandson, hasn't blinked in 3 minutes." Earl turned and looked at Tyler, who was in fact staring at George Strait with the wide, helpless expression of someone in the presence of a thing they'd never expected to see in their actual life. Earl felt something warm move through him. Affection, complicated by the specific pride of a grandfather who understands that the moments he creates are moments his family will carry. "He's a good kid," Earl said. "He knew something," George said, "when he signed you up for that barn show. He knew something about you that maybe you'd forgotten about yourself." He stood, extended his hand again. "I'll see you out there, Earl." "Yes, you will," Earl said. The roar of 18,000 people settling into a venue is a physical thing. It comes through the floor, through the walls, through the air itself. A sustained, layered sound that is part conversation, part anticipation, part something more primitive than either. Earl stood in the wings. He'd been in the wings of the Keltner barn, if a gap in a plywood wall could be called wings, and it had been nothing like this. This was a different country. The stage was enormous and lit with a precision that made it look like daylight, warmer and more golden than actual daylight, the kind of light that makes everything look like it matters. From where he stood, he could see the first 30 rows of the audience, a field of faces, people eating, laughing, pointing at the stage, checking their phones, looking up. Ordinary people on a Saturday night. Bobby was somewhere in the house. Tyler was in the wings 20 feet away, far enough to give his grandfather space, close enough to see his face. Jolene was in the house. She had arrived at the arena at 6:30 with Patrick and the kids, a boy named Carter, 12, and a girl named Lily, 10. Earl had seen her in the corridor outside the dressing room, and they had stood for a moment, looking at each other. And then she had stepped forward and hugged him. And he had put his arms around his daughter for the first time in 3 years, and neither of them said anything, because there wasn't anything to say that was bigger than what they were already saying. Patrick Greer had shaken Earl's hand firmly, with both hands, and looked him in the eye in a way that communicated something simple. "I've heard a lot about you, and I'm glad to finally be here." Carter had shaken his hand too, formal and serious in the way of a 12-year-old boy trying to rise to an occasion. Lily had looked at the Martin case and said, "Is that your guitar?" And when Earl said yes, she'd said, "Can I touch it?" And he'd opened the case and let her run her fingers across the strings. And the soft, unresonant sound they made, fingers, not a pick, had floated in the corridor for a moment, like something that had been waiting to happen. Now Jolene was out there somewhere in those 18,000 people. Earl looked down at the Martin D28 in his hands. The wood was warm. It was always warm in his hands, warmer than it should have been, warmer than the air temperature explained. He'd noticed that his whole life and never tried to account for it. Rick appeared at his elbow. 2 minutes, he said quietly. Then, "How are you doing?" "Fine," Earl said. Rick looked at him and clearly believed him, which was the correct response to the statement. "When Dennis introduces you, you'll hear the music bed come down. That's your cue to walk out. The guitar is already patched in. Just step up to the mic and go." "I know how it works," Earl said, not unkindly. Rick smiled. "Of course you do." He stepped back. Tyler came to stand beside his grandfather. He didn't say anything for a moment. They stood in the wings and listened to the crowd. "Grandpa," Tyler said, "Yeah, I know I put you in a lot of this without asking." "You did, and I know it hasn't been easy." "No," but Tyler paused. "Is it okay that I did it, looking back?" Earl looked at his grandson. This boy who had his grandmother's stubbornness and his father's patience, and something that was purely himself, a quality of attention, of genuine care for things that most people his age moved past too quickly. This boy who had mowed 3 lawns and printed out a confirmation email and left it on a counter with a handwritten note, and never once pressured him past the asking, and been there every step anyway. "Yeah," Earl said. "It's okay." Tyler nodded. He pressed his lips together. He was not going to cry in the wings of the AT&T Center. He was absolutely not going to do that. He was doing it a little bit. "Don't you start," Earl said. "I'm not starting anything," Tyler said. "Good." Earl looked at the stage. "Go find your dad." Tyler went. Earl turned back to face the light. The introduction came over the PA Dennis Pratt's voice because Rick had thought it was a good detail, and it was the same MC from the Kellner barn, brought down to San Antonio, introducing Earl to 18,000 people the same way he'd introduced him to 300. Our next performer is a gentleman from Abilene, Texas, a farmer, a father, a grandfather, and, as about 7 million people have recently discovered, a singer. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Earl Dawson. The applause started politely. A significant portion of the audience had seen the video, had been sent it by a friend, had encountered it on their feed, had watched it on their phone in bed, or at the kitchen table, or during their lunch break, and their applause carried recognition. But there were also people who hadn't seen it, people who were still settling in, people who were here for George Strait and weren't sure what to make of an old man in a straw hat walking out onto a concert stage. Earl walked out. He walked the same way he always walked, steady, unhurried, a slight forward lean, worn boots on a polished stage floor, straw resistal, plaid shirt, jeans that had been washed too many times to be any particular shade of blue anymore. The Martin D28 in his right hand, neck down, held easy. He reached the microphone, adjusted it exactly 2 inches down, the same as always, looked out, 18,000 faces. He found Bobby first, third row, center, because Rick had arranged good seats and Bobby's face was the face Earl had been reading for 40 years, and he read it now in half a second, his son, overwhelmed with something he was proud of, trying to hold himself together. Karen beside him with her hand over her mouth. He found Jolene 4 seats down from Bobby. She was sitting forward in her seat, her hands in her lap, her face open in a way he hadn't seen since she was a girl. The careful, adult management of her expression completely gone, stripped away by the moment. Patrick had his arm around her. Carter was staring at the stage. Lily was already clapping. He found Tyler in the wings, just barely visible, a shape in the shadow at stage left, the white of his face catching the edge of the stage light. He couldn't find Dale in the audience. Dale was somewhere in the upper sections, but he knew Dale was there, in a seat that Rick had arranged, with a ticket that Earl had paid for, wearing a hat that Margaret would have made a joke about. Earl looked out at 18,000 people. He put his left hand on the neck of the Martin D28, settled his right hand over the body, felt the wood warm in his hands the way it always had. He played the first chord. San Antonio Rose opened it as it had in the Kellner barn, but here, in this room, with this sound system and this acoustic space, it was different in a way that Earl felt in his chest. The guitar came back to him from all directions at once. A fullness that was almost disorienting at first, and then, within 2 bars, was simply the sound, the particular sound of this song in this room on this night. He settled into it the way you settle into a familiar gate. The room went quiet fast. Faster than he'd expected. Within the first verse, the same thing happened that had happened in the Kellner barn. The conversations stopped. The phones went down. The people who had been half paying attention became people who were entirely paying attention. But the scale of it was different. In the barn, it had been the quiet of 300 people. Here it was the quiet of 18,000. And that quantity of quiet has its own quality, a depth, a density, like the difference between a still pool and a still lake. Earl sang San Antonio, rose straight and clean, no ornamentation, no performance. He played the melody as he'd always played it, honestly, the way the song wanted to go. When he finished the last note and let it ring out into the arena, the silence held for a full 3 seconds before the applause came. The applause was enormous. He went directly into Panhandle Rag, the instrumental, his right hand finding its old fluency again. The melody dancing across the strings with the particular lightness of a song designed to make people feel something joyful in their feet. He saw people in the front rows moving. He saw smiles. He saw a woman in the 3rd row, maybe 60, maybe older, in a blue jacket, close her eyes and tip her head back with the specific expression of someone hearing something that reached them somewhere personal. When Panhandle Rag ended, the applause came again, louder this time, warmer. Earl looked out at the crowd. He let the quiet come back. Then he said into the microphone, and his voice speaking was different from his voice singing, rougher, more plainly itself. I'm going to play one more song. It doesn't have a name. I wrote it a long time ago for my wife, Dorothy. She passed 11 years ago. He paused. She would have been real amused by all this. Laughter from the crowd, warm, genuine laughter. The kind that comes from recognition. This is for her, Earl said. And for everybody who's got somebody they're carrying with them. He began to play. The song started the way it always started. The simple chord progression that opened like a door. 3 chords that somehow contained an entire geography. Flat land, wide sky, the particular light of late afternoon in West Texas when the world turns gold. And then his voice came in low and full, and the song filled the arena the way it had filled the Kellner barn. the way it had filled every space Earl had ever played it, which had only ever been one: the porch of his house in Abilene. Alone, for Dottie. He sang about the dust on Route 9, about a woman hanging laundry in April, about the bluebonnets coming up along the highway fence on a morning she would never see again, about the way certain kinds of love don't diminish with time but deepen, the way water deepens as it finds its channel until you can no longer see the bottom of it. He sang about loss the way a man sings about loss when he's had 11 years to understand it, not as something that took her away from him, but as something that revealed how much of himself she had been, how much of what he thought was just him had actually been the two of them together, and how the work of the years since had been learning to carry his half without forgetting what the whole had felt like. He sang about a grandson who showed up with a $15 entry fee and 3 lawns worth of work. And didn't say it that way, but it was in the song, the way new things enter old grief and ask you gently to keep going. He sang about a daughter he'd driven away and had found again just this week, just barely, just enough. The song lasted 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Earl knew this only because Connor had told him afterward the night of the Kellner barn. In the singing of it, it lasted no time at all, and it lasted the entire span of his life. When the last chord faded, the arena was absolutely silent. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. Then someone in the upper deck started clapping, and it spread like a wave. Instantaneous. Inevitable, until 18,000 people were on their feet, and the sound of it was a physical pressure. Something Earl felt in his sternum, in the backs of his hands, in the soles of his worn boots, on the polished stage floor. He stood at the microphone and let it come. He didn't bow. He didn't wave. He just stood there the way a man stands when something larger than himself is passing through the room, and he understands his job is to be present for it, not to perform it. After a long moment, he nodded once, the same nod he'd given the crowd in the Kellner barn, single and plain, and turned and walked off the stage. George Strait was standing in the wings when Earl came off. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at Earl with an expression that contained several things at once: respect, and something more personal than respect, and the specific recognition that passes between people who speak the same language and have just heard it spoken with uncommon fluency. He extended his hand. Earl shook it. "That song needs a name," George said. "I know," Earl said. "I think I know what it is." "What?" Earl thought for a second. "Route 9, he said. George nodded slowly. "That's right," he said. "That's exactly right." Tyler arrived from the side, and the careful composure he'd been maintaining for hours had fully dissolved. Now his face was open and wet, and not apologizing for either of those things. Earl put his arm around his grandson and held on. Bobby came down from the house, finding his way to the wings through a side entrance Rick had arranged. He put his hand on his father's back and didn't say a word. And Earl reached back and gripped his son's forearm briefly, the way men in their family had always communicated what couldn't be said. And then there was a hand on his arm from the other side. He turned. Jolene's face was her mother's face in certain angles. She'd always had that, even when they were not getting along, and it still caught him sometimes. She was 44 years old, and she looked like she'd been crying and didn't care who knew it. Behind her, Patrick was holding both kids, Carter with his arm around his father's waist, Lily with her face half hidden in Patrick's jacket. Earl looked at his daughter. "Hi, Dad," she said. Her voice was steady. She was working to keep it steady. He recognized the effort because he was making the same one. "Hi, Joe." She looked at him for a moment, this man in his straw hat and worn boots, standing in the wings of a concert hall where 18,000 people had just risen to their feet for him. This man who had been unreachable for years, and who had just, in 4 minutes and 12 seconds, said everything that 3 years of silence had prevented. "That was her," Jolene said. "The song. That was exactly her." "Yeah," Earl said. "You remembered everything. I didn't forget a single thing." Jolene took a breath that had something shaky in it. Then she stepped forward and Earl put his arms around his daughter, and this time the hug was longer, long enough to mean something. Long enough to account for 3 years, and a conversation at a memorial that had gone wrong, and all the calls that hadn't been made, and all the visits that hadn't happened, and all the distance that had accumulated, stone by stone, between two stubborn people who were not good at saying they were sorry, but were not, it turned out, incapable of it. Lily peeked out from Patrick's jacket and looked at Earl over her mother's shoulder. "Grandpa," she said. Earl looked at her over Jolene's shoulder. "Yeah, your guitar is really pretty." "Thank you," he said. "You can play it sometime if you want." Lily considered this with the gravity of a 10-year-old evaluating a serious offer. "Okay," she said. "I will." They went to a restaurant in the Pearl District after the show. Bobby and Karen, Tyler and Connor, Jolene and Patrick, and the kids. Dale Kowalski, who had made his way down from the upper deck with the look of a man who intended to eat something large and tell some stories. Rick Holloway joined them briefly, then bowed out with the grace of someone who understood the evening now belongs to the family. Even Dennis Pratt, who happened to still be in the building, was pulled in by Bobby and told to sit down and have some brisket. The table was loud. It had been a long time since Earl had been at a table that was that loud with people he loved. The kids were up past their bedtime and running on the particular electricity of a night that was obviously significant to the adults around them, and therefore felt significant to them too, in the contagious way that important evenings communicate themselves to children who don't yet have the context to fully understand them. Earl sat at the head of the table. He hadn't asked for that seat. It had just arranged itself, and watched his family around him. Dale was telling Bobby something about the upper deck view, using both hands to describe it. Karen was in conversation with Jolene, real conversation, easy and warm, and Earl watched his daughter laugh at something Karen said, and the laugh was fully her, fully Jolene, a sound he hadn't heard in 3 years. Tyler was showing Connor something on his phone. Carter was asking Patrick a question about something with great earnestness. Lily had taken the paper placemat and was drawing on it with crayons she'd found in a pocket of her jacket, apparently always prepared. Earl ate his brisket. It was good brisket. Somewhere behind them, the sounds of the Pearl District moved through the night, the Riverwalk a few blocks away, the restaurants and bars. The particular San Antonio sound of a Saturday night in October, when the weather had finally gone cool, and people were out in it gratefully, breathing air that had stopped trying to kill them. Lily looked up from her drawing and slid the placemat across the table to Earl. She had drawn a picture. It was, with the dimensional limitations of a 10-year-old with crayons, a man standing on a stage with a guitar. Above his head she had written in careful block letters, "Grandpa." Around him, in a semicircle, she had drawn what appeared to be a crowd of small circular figures. They were all, without exception, smiling. Earl looked at the drawing for a long moment. "What do you think?" Lily said. "I think," Earl said, "that's about right." He folded the placemat carefully and put it in his shirt pocket. 6 months later, a CD was released through a small independent label out of Austin that specialized in Texas's roots music. It contained 7 songs. 6 were traditional Texas country standards. 1 was an original listed on the back of the case as Route 9 E. Dawson. The liner notes were brief. They had been written by Earl, who was not a writer by any claim, and they said, "These songs were recorded in a studio in Austin in February. My daughter Jolene drove me to the sessions and back every day. My grandson Tyler sat in the control room and listened. My friend Dale Kowalski fell asleep in the lounge on the 3rd day and snored through 2 takes of Faded Love, which I've forgiven him for. My wife Dorothy taught me that music is how certain people say what they can't otherwise say. I am one of those people. These are the things I had to say. I hope they reach whoever needs them." The album did not chart nationally. It sold modestly, well enough to matter, not so widely that it changed Earl's life in the way celebrity changes lives. He still drove the F-150. He still lived on 42 acres outside Abilene. He still wore the same kind of clothes every day, and the straw resistal still fit the exact shape of his head, and the dust on Route 9 still moved from place to place on the dry West Texas wind. But on Friday evenings now, more often than not, there were cars in the driveway. Bobby's Ram 1500, with its cracked taillight that he'd finally gotten around to fixing. Jolene's silver SUV with the Austin bumper sticker and the kids' soccer gear in the back. Dale's old truck parked sideways the way Dale always parked, as if the concept of alignment was a suggestion. And on the porch, in the evenings, there was music, not performed, not recorded, not posted anywhere or watched by anyone except the people sitting in the chairs and leaning on the railing and sometimes sitting on the porch steps with their knees up. Just Earl with the Martin D28 playing the songs he'd always played, the ones he'd carried for 67 years in the place where some people carry words. The sun went down over the mesquite and the sky went orange, then purple, then the vast West Texas dark, and the stars came out, the full canopy of them. The Milky Way visible from horizon to horizon, and the music went up into that dark the way it always had, the way it always would, honestly, without apology, saying what it had to say to anyone who would listen. Lily sat on the porch steps one evening in April watching her grandfather play, and she turned to her mother and said, in the quiet that exists between songs, "Mom, why did he stop playing for so long?" Jolene looked at her father, this man, in his worn hat, his hands moving across the strings with the ease that looked like it had never been interrupted, like the guitar had always been there, and he had always been playing it. He didn't know he needed to come back yet, Jolene said. Lily thought about that. How did he find out? Jolene looked at Tyler, who was sitting beside his grandfather on the porch swing, listening with his eyes closed. Someone who loved him showed him the door, she said, and left it open. On the porch, Earl began to play the opening notes of Route 9. The bluebonnets were coming up along the fence line. The dust settled. The music moved through the evening air of Abilene like something that had always been there, like something that had never really left.